Hi there and welcome to another video from Hegarty Maths. It's our 8th video on index form, and this time we're talking about non-unit fraction powers, probably the most difficult of all of them. So let's give that a go. Now previously on Hegarty Maths we were able to do something like this. We were able to write 4 to the half all to the power of 3 as a single index form, because this is a power of the power rule. So we would say this is the same as 4 to the half multiplied by 3, like that, and a half multiplied by 3 is 3 over 2, multiplying a whole number by a fraction, so that's 4 to the 3 over 2. Okay? Similarly with 8 to the third all to the power of 5, we could write that as 8 to the third multiplied by 5, and that's going to be 8 to the 5/3. Okay? Now just before I move on, what actually does 4 to the half mean again? What does it actually mean? Do you remember from the last video, unit fraction powers? 4 to the half means the square root of 4, and all of this we are cubing. And 8 to the third means the cube root of 8, and all of this we are raising to the power of 5. Now this is what I want you to spot here. You may be given 4 to the 3 over 2. You would be given it from that point of view, and you have to know that it's the same thing as the square root of 4 cubed. And how are we going to do that? Well, I'll show you in the next slide. But similarly here, 8 to the 5/3, you've got to know that means the cube root of 8 all to the power of 5. And I'll show you how to do that in this slide coming up. So, if you see 4 to the 3 over 2, this is what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to say, okay, right, that's 4 to the half to the unit fraction of half cubed. And how do I know that's true? Well, because I know that a half multiplied by 3 is 3 over 2. I know that. So I know that by the power of the power rule, these things are going to multiply to give me the 3 over 2. So stripping them backwards, going the other way, I can strip them apart from each other and write 4 to the half all to the power of 3, because I know them two multiply in the end to get me that. Now I know what 4 to the half means. It means root 4. And I'm still cubing that. And in this case, root 4 is 2. So I'm going to do 2 to the power of 3, and I'm going to get the actual answer 8. So who would have thought I could actually look at 4 to the 3 over 2 and get the answer 8? Now let's do the same thing for 8 to the 5/3. I'm going to write it as 8 to the 1/3, the unit fraction, and I'm going to put a bracket there. And what am I going to put as the power out here? 5. How do I know I can do that? Because I know 5 multiplied by a third is 5/3. So alternatively, when I'm going the other way, I take that 5 and I strip it out and write it in power of the power form. Now 8 to the third, I know that means cube root 8, doesn't it? And don't forget, I'm raising all of that to the power of 5. Now the cube root of 8 is 2. And don't forget, I'm raising that to the power of 5. And 2 to the power of 5 is 2 multiplied by itself 5 times, is 32. And again, who would have thought 8 to the 5 over 3 was actually the whole number 32, but it is. So I'll do one more example and then try and write us a general rule. Now some people like a general rule to remember. I like to think of it in this way of breaking it into a unit fraction and a power of the power rule. So what would I do in this case? Well, I would write that as 27 to the 1/3. Write the 2/3 as a unit fraction, but remember to write that 2 on the outside here, because I know power of the power rule means I'm going to eventually multiply them and get my 2/3 back. Why is that helpful? Because I know what 27 to the third means. It means the cube root of 27, and don't forget, I'm squaring all that. Now the cube root of 27 is the answer 3, and don't forget, I'm squaring that, and 3 squared gives me 9. So there you go, 27 to the 2/3 is the same as 9. Now in general, some people like to remember this formula, but like I said, I like to break it up. Some people like to remember, I break it into a to the 1 over n all to the power of m, the top number. And people like to say in general m over n. This always is the nth root of a to the power of m. So some people just remember that formula there or work with that formula. I like to break it into a unit fraction and then a power on the outside. But you can just remember that as well. it's the exact same. It's just, do you like remembering formulas or do you like working it out each time? So I think it's time to try some questions. Remember, pause the video and try each one before I go through. Here's the first set. Evaluate the following. So I look at that and I say, right, that's 4 to the half all cubed. I know what 4 to the half means. It means the square root of 4 cubed. The square root of 4 is 2, so that's 2 cubed, and the answer is 8. The second one, 8 to the 2/3. Well, I'm going to write it as a unit fraction, 8 to the thirds, and I'm going to write to the power of 2 on the outside. I know what that means. That means the cube root of 8, but don't forget I'm squaring it. The cube root of 8 is 2, and don't forget I'm squaring it, so the answer is 4. 100 to the 5/2. Now I write that as 100 to the 1/2, a half, and I bring that 5 on the numerator out as power of the power. I know what that means. That means square root of 100, all to the power of 5. The square root of 100 is 10, but don't remember that's to the power of 5. And 10 multiplied by itself 5 times is going to equal 100,000. 32 to the 3/5, so that's 32 to the 1/5, all of that to the power of 3. And I know what 32 to the 1/5 means. It means the fifth root of 32, and don't forget all of that is to the power of 3. And the fifth root of 32 is 2, and don't forget that's to the power of 3, and 2 cubed is 8, and we're done. Let's try some more. Pause and have a go. Now we're introducing the negative powers to revise the negative powers. Do you remember what negative power means? Well, 9 to the negative 3/2 means 1 over 9 to the positive 3/2. Okay? Now, what does that mean? Well, that means 1 over 9 to the half, all of that cubed. I'm stripping out that 3. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means 1 over 9 to the half means the square root of 9, but don't forget the power of 3. And the square root of 9 is 3, so that's 1 over 3 cubed. And therefore we can say the answer to that is 1 over 3 cubed, which is 27. Okay? The next one, 32 to the negative 2/5. Well, that means 1 over 32 to the positive 2/5. And so we can do our normal trick on the denominator. That's 1 over 32 to the 5th, all squared. Now 32 to the 5th means the fifth root of 32, so that's 1 over the fifth root of 32, but don't forget that's squared. The fifth root of 32 is 2, so that's 1 over 2 squared, and 2 squared is 4, so this is 1 over 4. Okay, next set of question. They look pretty similar, but it says write your answer in surd form. The reason it says that is these aren't whole number answers. So let's do what we normally do. 3 to the 3/2, let's write that as 3 to the half all cubed. Now 3 to the half means the square root of 3, doesn't it? The square root of 3 cubed. Now let's just say what that means. That means root 3 multiplied by root 3 multiplied by root 3. Now we know that root 3 multiplied by root 3 here, that's root 3 squared, isn't it? And that's got to be 3. Do you remember doing that in the square root video? So that's got to be a 3 there. So this thing here is root 3 multiplied by 3. Now a mathematician writes that as 3 root 3. Wait till the surds video to see that, but that's how they would write root 3 multiplied by 3. Let's have a go at this one. 7 to the 5/2. What does that mean? Well, it means 7 to the half, all of that to the power of 5. Now 7 to the half means the square root of 7, and it's to the power of 5. Now let's write down what this actually means here. This means root 7 multiplied by root 7 multiplied by root 7 multiplied by root 7 multiplied by root 7. Now you know that 2 root 7's multiplied together is root 7 squared, which is just 7, and there's another 2 here which are root 7 squared, which is 7. So this thing here gives us a 7, this thing here gives us a 7, so it's 7 times 7, and this thing here gives us a root 7. So we've got 49 multiplied by root 7, okay? And the way a mathematician writes that, you'll see in the third section, is just 49 root 7. And there we go, we're done. So that's it for this video. Tune in for the last video in index form where we revise everything all together. Thanks for watching.